Hey folks, it's Patriot Nurse here, and we're in a different location today, as you can tell. This is one of my storage rooms upstairs, and in this segment I wanted to talk about something a little bit different today from a medical perspective, and that is the psychological impacts of the Schumer hitting the fan. And a lot of people in the Patriot movement and in the general preparatory movement are not really fans of psychology in general, and I think that's okay because it's been abused. Psychology has been abused and manipulated to accomplish ends for people who are very powerful throughout history. However, I think it's a mistake to dismiss psychology and psychological knowledge in general because it can be very helpful. And one of the things that I wanted to discuss specifically here is related to this is I think that a lot of people in the preparatory movement have stored food, they've stored firearms, they have a bug out location, but I don't necessarily think that a lot of people have really processed what it's going to mean from a body-mind perspective when you have moved from your home base, or if you're not living at your bug out location. And I haven't really assessed the impacts of what it would look like if the world as we know it shifts. What that would look like for themselves, what that would look like for their family, especially if they have children. And I wanted to today kind of briefly touch on that. When the Schumer hits the fan, in whatever way, shape, form, or fashion that it does, the first thing that will probably happen is the shock and awe factor. And if you remember September 11th, what did you see in mass right after the planes hit the buildings? People were what? They were glued to their TVs. They were doing that number. And you heard people saying, it just looks like a movie. Exactly. People, that first phase of grief is that shock and kind of what's going on. I can't process this factor. When you see that with people, that ought to kind of give you a clue to prepare yourself mentally for what's coming. Now, let's assume that you've left the city, if it's gotten pretty bad. If you have children, their world is going to be upended. Your world is going to be upended, but especially if you have children, you need to make accommodation for this. You cannot expect your children, especially if they're younger, i.e. under 12, 13, you cannot expect them to be little survivalists. They're just, as much as you try, okay, children naturally regress mentally when they are put in a stressful situation. Any psych nurse, any pediatrics nurse can tell you this. So I think it's important to make accommodation for them especially, but also to make accommodation for yourself. And how do we do this? How do we comfort ourselves? How do we help cope with the stuff whenever it comes? And the first thing that I would like to say is that if you are not a follower of Jesus Christ, I believe wholeheartedly that you're going to encounter more difficulty in this area. Enough said about that. There are scriptures out there and you can read them. I'm not going to turn this into a full-on revival here, but that is something that you need to consider. Another thing here to consider is that we naturally, even as adults, tend to regress as well in stressful situations. So, think about this. What are the things that help you cope with stressful situations now? If you're having just a really bad day, what are the things that you do? Do you turn on the TV and veg out? You're not going to be able to do that when the poop hits the fan. Do you consume large quantities of alcohol or drugs? Well, you're probably not going to be able to do that either. If you've stored alcohol, I would suggest that you not waste it on making yourself intoxicated because you're probably going to need it for medicinal reasons. Are you going to be able to sing or pray? Well, you'll probably be able to pray. You may or may not be able to sing, but music is a big part of coping mechanisms, and it has been for thousands of years. So, without further ado, let's kind of evaluate some of the things here, the props, if you will. This is a dulcimer here, and the Southern Appalachian people and Appalachian people in general for hundreds of years have been very musical people, and I think that goes hand in hand with the fact that the Appalachian and mountain people have encountered severe poverty. And because of that, we have learned to cope with music. That's why country music comes out of Nashville. And that's why a lot of your bluegrass and your country musicians come from the mountains. It's because this is a tradition with us. And I think that's something that the greater part of America can learn from, to cope using music. And if you haven't stored one of these and you are a follower of Christ and you are a believer, store a hymn book, okay? Because I don't know how, I mean, I can't remember all the words to hymns now when I'm not particularly stressed. What's it going to be like when you really need a hymn to lift you up, when you really need to hear that song and you don't know? That, I mean, that's going to be frustrating for one, but how much nicer would it be to lead family worship or to just comfort yourself in general with a hymn book? So just want to throw that out there. Let's talk about kids, okay? Just because the poop hits the fan, that does not mean that your children suddenly stop needing to play. Children learn and they cope with play. They play with different things. I mean, anybody who has a child can tell you that it doesn't make sense to spend a whole lot of money on toys, because you can spend $500 on a toy and the kid will go out there and find a stick and it will work just as well. So a good thing probably to store would be just something really light. You don't have to spend a lot of money on this. I'm talking really bare bones stuff here. This is a puppet, but you can make a puppet from an old sock and a marker, okay? Kids have great imaginations. Little army men, that's not a bad thing to store, because if for whatever reason you're evaluating a tactical situation, having something in front of you might make it a little bit easier. Blocks, you can make these from just spare wood parts or whatever if you're at your bug out location. It's not like you have to spend money on this proper, but I'm just trying to give you some ideas, because children are going to need to cope with things as well. And we cannot expect children in a stressful situation to use the same coping mechanisms as adults. It's just impractical and it's just flat out wrong. A coloring book, it doesn't weigh very much, okay? Now, this stuff, this is if you've already gotten your beans, bullets, and band-aids, okay? I know a lot of people have. And this is sort of survive to thrive types of things, not necessarily alluding to Steve Quayle's type of stuff. But think about this, folks. What are we surviving for? If you're surviving for a miserable existence where you hate every day of your life, are you really going to want to survive? All that food and all those guns are not going to want to help you if you feel like ending it all. So just putting that out there. Comfort foods as well. Here's cocoa. Especially for women. Women tend to like culinary types of things as well. But don't be afraid to store some candy bars or something, you know, just to kind of ease the troubled times a little bit. It's okay. You don't have to store wheat berries and powdered milk for everything. Books here are not a bad idea. They don't have to weigh very much, and you don't have to have 1,000 of them. Just a few of them at your bug out location or wherever, just to help you. And one of the things I like here is books about the stars, because if the grid goes down and we are living without light, it will be nice to know what those stars are that you're looking at. And then checkerboards and bingo, etc. So I hope this has been somewhat informative for you today. A little bit off the beaten path, but I wanted to throw it out there because I don't hear a lot of people talking about it. So for now, this is Patriot Nurse signing off, and I'll see y'all later. Bye.